Okay, let's accept that one. 7Q 1100. Let's say hello, and we can zoom in on the board. So I get to go first. Let's go ahead and close off the bishop exchange. And bring the silver up to stop the advance of the rook pawn. Okay, and he brought his silver up too. So this is starting to look like a Yagura. Here I can push my rook pawn, see if this is the intent. Yeah, it looks like that very much. Let's go all the way though. Keep his pieces occupied there, defending this square. And he started to move the king. So I could do the quick Yagura, I guess. Where I bring my king up and over. And I could, yeah, get the bishop down here, step aside. So it looks like he's bringing the silver out here. Let's see what's going on. Let's go ahead and play this move. Opens up the diagonal for the bishop. And then, see, I can bring my other gold into the picture. So we're getting the complete setup here almost. Just one more gold move, I guess, to get to this square. And I will have the Yagura castle. Then I might proceed on the king on this side. Okay, so he wants to break this diagonal. Let's see if he retreats his bishop here. I mean, breaks the edge. We'll attack this pawn on this square. He pushes, I take, he takes. I can drop a pawn here. That's defended by the knight, lance, and king. So I think I will leave this back and just bring my silver up. Do some kind of climbing silver over here. So he's pushing his rook pawn now. If the rook pawn comes forward, I can still just take it, I believe. His bishop is hitting here and here. Ah, he's maneuvering his silver around, so maybe he's going to do some kind of climbing silver thing too. Okay, so let's start pushing this third file pawn. So we'll open up a square for the knight to come forward. I see, he got his silver out of the way of this pawn. So his plan is to push this pawn forward. I take, he takes. I can still drop a pawn after that. Do I want to move my knight first? Or do I want to push the pawn first? Let's bring the knight up. He's going to lift his lance and put his rook behind it. I've seen this before, but still this pawn looks pretty strong. We'll see what he can do. In the meantime, I will proceed with my counterplay over here. Yeah, so now he puts the bishop on this diagonal. So he's got bishop here, and he'll have rook and lance all hitting here. And I'll have knight, lance, and king. Can push the pawn forward. He takes. That does not work at this point. When he pushes the pawn forward, then I will take. And we'll see, he can probably drop a pawn in here. It might be useful to bring my bishop in here. But, can't put my silver, I can't put my silver here. Could push this pawn forward and see how he takes. Let's see if I should do something here first. I take, he's going to take with the silver. I drop a pawn. Isn't he actually in a bit of trouble here? Okay, so he just runs. Yeah. So I still can't put my silver on this square. Can't drop a pawn here because it's not legal. No legal pawn drops. Should I do something here to shore this up, or does it just make things worse? But push this pawn forward, he can take with the bishop, the pawn, or the silver. My idea is to try and shut the bishop down on that diagonal. So if he takes with the pawn, then it's blockaded, but then he has a push later. Yeah, let's just push this pawn forward. Defended by the knight. And we'll see what kind of damage he can do over to the edge there. Yeah, he pushes. So I think I should take. I'm about to get overpowered here. And see how he takes back. Oh, then he puts the rook behind it. Okay, so let's attack his silver here. Drops back with the silver. Now that silver is blocking the bishop, so when he takes here I'll be able to drop a pawn here. Might have been able to do that anyway. So this means that my silver can come forward. It also means that I can push forward where the rook pawn is. Or maybe I should have just pushed that immediately. No, but it's better with the silver out of the way of the rook, I would think. Okay, yeah, he takes now, so I'm going to drop pawn. Takes. So if I take with the knight, then he can drop a pawn here. I can put my silver here. Aha, he moved his silver out of the way, so he noticed this bishop line. So that's his pawn there. I could take this pawn. And I'm attacking his rook with my lance. I'm also giving this square for my my silver. To block his bishop. I don't know what he can do. He just has pawns to drop, but they might have some dangerous consequences. But a silver here would protect this square. And with the knight here, he can't he can't drop a pawn. If he takes the knight with his silver, I'll take his rook. That should be a good trade. Ah, so he does the pawn drop there. So I will take once. Then he'll do a pawn drop here, I guess, supported by the silver. But then I will put my silver here, but then he can take the lance and promote. Okay. Can I do something else? I have a lance and a pawn. Let's just block his rook out. Okay, now I can take here. He's still. Well, now he could take my. He could take my knight with his silver. I could drop another lance here, or here, or here, depending on what he does. Threaten to take here. Yeah, so he takes there. So if I drop the lance, don't want to drop it here where his bishop will take it. Although that would work too, wouldn't it? But he might drop a pawn here. Drop it. Well, he could still drop a pawn here. I could take. Not sure where. Let's try a lance drop here. I can take that. He can drop a pawn there. That's interesting. So now he can take back with the silver. Oh, I don't have a silver to drop. What happened? Oh, I was going to move a silver here. So if I put my silver here now, it's in the fire of his bishop. So let's take. Then put my silver here. I keep thinking I have a silver to drop, but actually it's not a piece I can drop. It's a piece I can move in place. He was expecting that. So he brings the knight in. So I'm going to take the rook, but I might get mated. I guess I should think about that if I'm going to get mated first. So I take the rook. He brings the silver forward with check. He might even promote it. But actually, I can take it. So he brought the knight in with check. And then there's also the bishop on this diagonal. So I take, he can take back. I can run, though, now, since he's moved the knight away from that square. Yeah, if he takes with the bishop, I can take back with the pawn. And my bishop is looking at his promoted knight there. And my silver is also looking at that. So he can take there. I can take back. Can take there. I can take back. Does he have some idea here? The silver, I mean, the bishop is hitting the silver, but the silver is still... well, he's got some pieces he can drop now, like a lance or a pawn. Okay, but now I'm not in check, and I've got some pieces I can drop too. So how about if I do this? King runs. Now I can take this pawn. When I take the pawn, though, Ah, the king is momentarily blocked the bishop there. That's nice. I can start pushing these things forward too. Do I want to defend my silver though? Yeah, step forward with the silver. Oh, he can take it there. He can take it there. That was foolish. That was foolish. But I have my rook and my silver on this side and my other rook on this side. And bishop here could come out to one of these diagonals. I just have this exposed king. So what has he got? He's got a gold he can drop. He's got a silver he could drop, and he's got a lance he could drop, and a knight. So probably I'm in trouble here, just because I don't have any pieces around my king. He could start with a gold drop here. Well, he is starting to think here. The knight. Okay, so let's run. Quick like a bunny. At least he doesn't have any heavy pieces he can drop like a rook. That's very important. He's got the lance. Ah, he's going to take my... I guess it's better if he takes the silver than if he takes the bishop here. That's what I'm thinking anyway. Okay, the pawn is coming forward slowly, slowly. I could take it now. Attack his knight. Can take that. And that. So he's eliminated all the defenders around my king, but he doesn't have a piece in that's nearby. Ah, he moved his king back. Should I go for the attack here again? That's a very dangerous move I played there. Aha, he leaves this diagonal open. So I have an idea here. Dropping a gold there to defend this pawn, which is keeping his bishop out of my camp. And if he drops some generals nearby, well, I've got a couple of pieces here and some pieces I could drop to defend. And I guess he just resigned then. All right, well, let's thank him for the game. Here, let's go back to the full screen mode. So a pretty exciting game there. Now we can check that out with Elmo and Shogi Dokuro and see how it goes. So I'll see you guys then. Bye now. So I took a look at the game with Elmo and Shogi Dokuro, and this is the graph of the results. I'm Sente here, so the lines above the midpoint are favorable to me, and the lines below the midpoint are favorable to my opponent, to Gote. So it's interesting, it stayed pretty level through the opening, and then coming out of the opening, actually I've got somewhat of an advantage. I guess Elmo didn't really like the edge attack, the way that Gote was playing. But then I make a mistake, and the attack starts to pay off. And right here's the peak moment where he could have maybe put me away. but that he didn't play the best move there, and then the advantage shifted back to me, and I kept the advantage the rest of the game. So that was kind of interesting, sort of the way I was feeling about the game at the time. But I wasn't sure, actually, I was doing good at this point, because his edge attack was a bit scary to me. Anyway, let's play through the game. So I'm going for a Yagura castle here. I'm going for a quick Yagura, so I keep the gold. Let's mark the gold. This gold. I keep this gold in the back here, and my idea is to bring my king up and over like this, and then move the bishop out of the way like that. So that's the fast Yagura. It saves you a setup from the other Yagura lines where this gold would come here immediately, and it's kind of in the way of the king and bishop dance. So yeah, it saves you one tempo if you can get away with it, and it seems like I could in this position. So let's just go through the opening. It seems like this is all okay for both sides. And I pushed the rook pawn just to see how he was going to defend on this side. And that also sets up my counterplay for later in the game. So I'm going to get to a castle position. The reason I selected the Yagura castle, by the way, is because in this position it already seemed clear that that my opponent, that Gote, was playing a static rook position. And I've read that the Yagura is pretty solid against these static rook attacks. So I was happy to go with that. And it's one of the few openings I'm familiar with, so that's what I'm doing here. And we finally get to the Yagura setup here. This is pretty much the complete setup. And it's still even. The first questionable move is the first place where you see the evaluation jump in my favor is this pawn push. The what is the AI? The AI is recommending knight 8a to 7c, so that would be this knight, bringing this knight up to this square instead, maybe preparing to push the pawn on the 8th file. But he pushed it first. I guess this is okay. It's not really given a question mark until this move. This move I thought was a little bit funny. So why is he retreating the silver here? I think basically he's trying to open up this diagonal for his bishop, because he does put his bishop on that diagonal later. So I think that is the idea there. But the AI doesn't really approve of that. In fact, it would push a pawn forward, pawn 1c. So it would actually push this edge pawn forward over here, which is kind of a waiting move, I guess. Anyway, he dropped his silver back. I keep bringing my silver up. And then he does push the pawn on the edge. And let's see, I bring another pawn up on the 3rd file, and he brings his silver up. So the AI did not like this silver maneuver either, or the Elmo didn't like it. It would rather move the bishop. So now's the time the bishop could go from 2b to 3a and start to look at this edge pawn. So he's building up the edge attack. He's going to do that the next move, I think. Let's see, I bring my knight out, and he brings his lance up. Oh, that's right, he does the lance setup first. Yeah, the Elmo did not really like the lance move either. Once again, it wants to bring the knight up to 7c. Let's see. Didn't like my knight move. It wanted me to push the pawn from 3f to 3e, which is actually very logical to continue my attack over here on the side where the bishop is. Get my counterplay going a little bit faster. It was a bit slow in the game, I think. So anyway, but he's taking his time setting up this edge attack, and I push the pawn on the 3rd file, the next move. So I think this is all working out to my favor. His edge attack is just not impressive at this point. Although I found it a bit scary. It's just not impressive to to Elmo, who's evaluating this with the computer eyesight. Anyway, I continue pushing on the against this on the right side, and he pushes his pawn forward. So I guess this is logical. But the next move, he brings his rook behind the lance. I've seen this idea before. It's kind of neat, I think, setting up this battery. And he's coordinating with the bishop. He's got a silver nearby that can hop in. It's starting to look pretty threatening to me, and he can also bring his knight in. So getting a lot of force over there. But the AI did not really like that rook move. It would rather, let's go back. Yeah, instead of the rook move, it would play bishop 3a to 6d. So it would bring the bishop out. Let's see where that's going. 3a to 6d. It would bring the bishop out here. That's a good square for the bishop, actually. It is looking along this diagonal towards my rook. And it gets away from any attack I have over here on the right side. Looks interesting. Anyway, but he continued with his idea. Gote is playing for this edge attack with the doubled, with the rook and lance battery. And I continue with my counterplay on the other side, which is actually approved of by Elmo. So this is all still going well for me. I guess my attack is now coming forward a little bit faster than his, and I can deal with this lance attack. Here's my first little misstep. What did I do? I took with the knight, and it would prefer taking with the lance. I wasn't sure about that because there's always the pawn drop here. Yeah, hard for me to see why that's better, honestly. maybe one of you can explain it. So lance. Yeah. Let's back up. Where were we? He brought his lance forward. I dropped a pawn. It seems to be okay. He took the pawn with his lance, and then my next move, knight takes lance on 9g, and it's just definitely recommending lance takes lance. 9i takes 9g. So if I had a lance here, and he dropped a pawn, maybe there's some counter, like maybe I can drop a pawn too, and that might be disruptive. I see that idea later in Elmo's commentary. Anyway, so this lets him back into the game. Well, it just dropped my evaluation a little bit. I still have an advantage. And then, let's see, he responded with a silver move. He could have dropped a pawn at 3f. Let's show that. Dropping a pawn at 3f is interesting. Yeah, he doesn't have a pawn in this file, so he can drop a pawn there. That's my pawn there. And that hits my knight. My knight has nowhere to go. So that's a little tactic both of us overlooked. Anyway, he played the silver move, bringing his silver out of the way of the bishop once again, bringing more force against my the 9g square. And now I just moved the knight out of the way with knight 9g to 8e. Yeah, so here's the idea the AI has. It wants to drop a pawn at 9c. Drop the pawn in front of the rook. So try and disrupt the communication over here. And it actually says after the pawn drop that Sente will take back with the knight. So that would momentarily obscure the rook. I'm not sure what goes wrong if he moves forward with the rook. Maybe I can keep dropping things. Well, I only have one pawn and one lance. Yeah, I'm not quite sure why he takes back with the knight there. But anyway, that seems to be where I start to go downhill. Yeah, it's tough to defend against these edge attacks, and I'm just not finding the best way. Although I did find some way to defend. I took, and then he dropped a pawn there, and I took that. And this seems to be here's I did drop a pawn at 9c, so I guess I had a similar idea, and he did take with the knight. Yeah, maybe he just wants to activate. I see what I missed. I missed the fact that I have a knight here. So when I drop a knight on 9c, I'm hitting the rook. So that's why the pawn drop earlier he takes with the knight and blocks that file. So okay, so I did find the pawn drop. I just should have played it a move earlier. So anyway, let's continue in the game. The pawn drop happens a bit later. And then there's a kind of a little exchange of mistakes here. I could have, instead of dropping the lance here, let's see, so instead of moving the silver, he could have dropped another pawn at 9g. And instead of dropping the lance, I could have moved my pawn from 2e to 2d. That is going back to this side of the board, which is actually pretty logical if I want to continue with the counterplay. That would be the next move to play. It's just interesting that that Elmo can play away here and think that I'm good over here. But that's the advantage of being a computer. You can figure these things out. Anyway, I didn't do that. I kept playing on the side here, trying to defend, and then he's got a slight edge through this part. But I am, counterattacking his rook there. And what's interesting is that he didn't defend the rook and he let me take it, but that's actually not a good move for me to take it. And he has, well, it's an okay move. It didn't, but he has probably a winning attack here at this point. It does not show a forced mate, but the move it gives is bishop 3a takes 8f. So that is a very interesting move. It's a bishop sacrifice. Take that silver, and I guess if I take back, he'll have a silver knight and a lance in hand. He'll have a knight here and a silver here, and my king is kind of open on the edge, although I do have 2 golds over here. Maybe they're a bit far away from the action. So I guess with all of these minor pieces, he has a winning attack over here on the side. But he's down in material at this point because he gave up his rook. So if he doesn't find the best move here, then things backfire, and that's what happened in the game. Instead of continuing the attack with bishop takes silver there, he played the move. Let's clear that. He played the move. I took with the lance. He played the move. Yeah, he dropped a... Oh no, he moved his knight up and promoted. So he's got a promoted knight there, checking my king. And I have this one escape square, and that saves me. And then the game is mine the rest of the way because my king is just successful in running away. Well, or taking pieces. I guess I could have considered running, but it seems like those exchanges all worked in my favor. And now I can start dropping pieces into my enemy camp and chasing him around. And at the very end, he just kind of ran out of material to attack. And then my last move was to drop the gold here. This was to keep his bishop shut out by defending that pawn. It's not the best move here, according to Elmo, but I think it's a good practical move. So I won't criticize myself for that move, but just for amusement to point out the move that Elmo wants to play. Elmo wants to continue with the attack, and it would drop a gold to 7b. Let's see, instead I dropped a gold to 7f to defend here against that bishop coming into my camp, and Elmo would drop a gold at 7b, which is a nice attacking move, attacking the pinned silver here, while this silver can't defend it. This knight can't defend it. So that's probably a very strong attacking move. Maybe it wins. Although it's not a forced mate. Elmo would show a sign here. If it was a forced mate, it would put up a notice. So, but probably it's a strong attack. Anyway, playing a defensive move like that, I think, is not bad because if your king is safe, then you can attack with much more freedom. Anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.